wanted bad nights, but they served a purpose. Didn't know them, but the pain was worth it. In every single way, girl, I beat the curses. I've seen the truth about me.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spoiler Warning Podcast. This is review number 790 with a review of Mickey 17. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning Podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week on the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a theater near you. This week, we're sitting down to talk about the latest film from Bong Joon Ho. And, my thematic question to start this episode off for you, Stephen, that just barely relates to the movie is, what's your favorite sauce?
I knew when you were teeing up that it would barely relate to the movie that you would ask me my favorite sauce. It's a great question. It's one I've been thinking about ever since I saw Mickey 17. I think this is not going to be a very, cultured sounding answer, but I truly think the sauce that I eat rarely enough that I'm always thrilled when I get a chance is a barbecue sauce. Like specifically a Carolina Gold barbecue sauce, especially if you could mix it, like have that and some ranch on like a chicken type thing, like a hot wing. I just love me some ranch and love me some Carolina barbecue sauce. So for some reason, at least in SF, barbecue sauce just doesn't come up very often. Like I don't feel like I have many opportunities to eat it, but I love it every time I actually have it.
Yeah, as somebody who is not familiar with Carolina sauces,
right.
Is it kind of like a vinegar-based buffalo-y type sauce?
Sort of. So North Carolina does vinegar-based sauce, and
Okay.
South Carolina does mustard-based sauce. So the Gold is the mustard-based sauce in particular.
Yeah.
But it is similar vinegary type bite. It's a very, very similar flavor profile.
In the immortal words of Joey Tribbiani, put your hands together. Because I want a vinegar-based mustard sauce.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's his last name, right? Joey Tribbiani? Friends?
Yeah, I think so.
It's been like 1,000 years since I've seen it. So for me, I wanted to ask this question and didn't even bother to think up my own answer to it. I am probably going to break the rules because I assume a sauce has to be more than a single ingredient.
Okay.
But can I say runny egg yolk is the best sauce?
So you're not going to go hollandaise. You just want the yolk.
I want the yolk. Like anything that you put like a fried egg on with the runny yolk makes it better. So I'm just going runny yolk. Put that on tater tots. Put it on any kind of potato. Put it on meats. Yeah. Hey, runny egg yolk in pasta.
Yeah, no, it's true. Carbonara is delicious.
It's basically runny egg yolk is the best sauce.
But if egg yolk is a sauce, then what isn't the sauce? Like, is just butter a sauce now? I guess it is. You would describe butter sauce. Yeah, I'm talking myself into it. I hear it now.
Let's just presume that there's like a little dash of mustard or something in the egg yolk just to add enough extra components to make it into a sauce. I don't know.
Right. No, that's a good call.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want barbecue sauce. It doesn't have to be Carolina Gold. Just your standard order brown barbecue sauce that you would get out of a bottle anywhere. I just love that. I feel like when I was younger, we would go to barbecues more often because people had backyards, I guess. And so just having an overcooked burger with like some onions and tomatoes on it and then a big squirt of barbecue sauce. Ooh, nothing better. Nothing better than that.
Yeah, I'm down for it. I don't know if anybody listening is down for this entire conversation, but we'll find out when the YouTube videos all end 3 seconds in. But I had to ask it.
Oh, also white truffle puree.
All right, Steven, now that we're done with the important question, you ready to get into this review?
I'm ready.
All right, let's take a listen to the trailer for Mickey 17 and then come back and give everybody a review.
Hi, Mickey. Are you experiencing any vertigo?
I guess I am feeling a little dizzy.
Oh, wow! Did you see that?
Now, I wouldn't be surprised if you're thinking at this point, what have I done?
How lucky can one guy be?
Nothing was working out, and I wanted to get off of Earth.
You're applying to be an expendable?
Yeah.
You read through the whole application.
Ain't that a kick in the head?
Yeah, I should have read through it.
Once you die, we'll print a new version of your body.
My head keeps
They made me work my ass off on one mission after another.
Every time you die, we learn something new, and humanity moves forward.
Oh, man, he's alive. It's fine.
My life is gonna be beautiful.
Vicky, it's not looking very good for you.
Yeah, no.
I'm sure you're used to it by now, but what's it feel like to die?
Even on my 17th go-around, I hate dying.
Why aren't you dead? Multiples. In the case of multiples,
It's just like,
we exterminate every individual.
tell me quick.
Let's blow up these second-hand baloney boys.
Why don't you guys do rock, paper, scissors, and then we'll just shoot the loser.
Tell me quick. Oh, another kick. Tell me quick. Another kick in the head.
I don't like you, but I'm you. I'm not you. I'm gonna kill you.
Tell me quick.
All right, so that was the trailer for Mickey 17, which is the story of a guy named Mickey who is what's called an expendable, which is a person who has volunteered for a program where when you die, they reprint you and they keep sending you off in to do dangerous things. And he is on board a ship flying off to colonize a planet somewhere because people are trying to escape Earth. Stephen Miller, what did you think of Mickey 17?
Man, I feel very conflicted about Mickey 17. I guess I should start by saying I am not a Bong Joon Ho completist, like not even close. I've seen The Host, I've seen Snowpiercer, I've seen Parasite. So that means I have seen the movies that are probably most obviously about something, you know, clear metaphors that are trying to drill in some kind of social concept. I have not really seen what I assume to be the other side of Bong Joon Ho, like the Oksha side, you know, the more lighthearted, whimsical, goofier version of his personality. And so fans of all of his work might love this. I have no idea, you know, but for me, watching the movie that was the follow-up to Parasite, I definitely set the bar pretty high in terms of how hard-hitting are the themes going to be? How much is this going to communicate one crystallized idea to me? And this movie is all over the place. And sometimes all over the place is a great thing to be in this movie. Like, it is very entertaining in many places. I think the cast is great. I think Robert Pattinson, I love whatever he's doing. I'm so glad he is continuing to use his post-Twilight cred to just make the weirdest possible artistic choices. I'm a big big fan of that approach. Speaking of weird, there are 3 people who I think are slowly joining the pantheon of weirdo supporting actors, and that is Steven Yeun, Toni Collette, and Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah.
I mean, you've basically got Bubble and Squeak, Knives Out, and Poor Things. Like, all those versions of their characters are just ramped up even more here, and they are clearly loving, like, relishing this newfound part of their career where they just get to play like total goofballs. And I laughed a lot watching them. Like, I enjoyed a lot of this movie. I also enjoy the core idea of the movie, the idea of an expendable. That is the most Snowpiercer, Parasite, whatever adjacent part of this. The idea that someone is so on the lower class of a capitalistic machine that they have to literally die over and over again, and that is their purpose, is to be the person who gets fucked over for the sake of other people having a more convenient existence. It's great. You could easily build a movie around all of that. And when this movie is a montage of Robert Pattinson dying, when it's showing the jarring disconnect between how horrific his life is and the way everyone treats him in this shared workspace, it's all very funny, and there's so much there that you can mine. But the movie also tries to be about a bunch of other things. Like, it's about capitalism, but it's also about religious fervor. sometimes. It's about a person wanting to be a different version of themselves, you know? It's about kindness to animals. And I don't really know how to tie all of those into a bow. And I don't mean it had to be a didactic, this is about one thing, here's the obvious metaphor. It's just, I couldn't tell. The ideas this movie brings up at the opening are not the ideas that get satisfied by the climax of this movie. It feels like somewhere along the journey, it got hijacked by other ideas, and only a couple of them get to gracefully land the plane. And it wound up being a movie that I found very entertaining in pure filmmaking craft. Like, Bong Joon Ho knows how to direct the hell out of a scene. And there's plenty of stuff here that is big and impressive. And the actors are all having a great time. And I enjoy watching them having a great time. But I just felt like it was deflated by a lack of having some kind of focused idea of what story it wants to tell and what it wants to communicate. I'll say more, but I kind of want to know roughly where you are, I guess, before I dig into more specifics.
Yeah, so I think the way I approach this film is, like, obviously I was aware of it as being a follow-up to Parasite, but, like, I had seen the trailers, as we were kind of joking before this episode started, like, a million times. So I knew tonally the difference, and I didn't walk into it holding up that bar and hoping it was going to clear something. I walked in just being like, looks like it could be kind of funny. And I think that I got that. I think that there are a lot of ideas in this film. Some of them are great, but there's also just a lot of ideas. This is a film that is throwing out a lot of concepts, a lot of scenarios, and it's trying to do a bunch of stuff. But it's also, like, I think the biggest problem with this film is that it is too heavily satirical. It like nothing feels real, and so much so that there's stuff that I kind of don't really get. Like, you hit on a few things that I'd like to double down on, but from the standpoint of, like, making this point is, so the religious fervor aspect of this film, right? I am not sure whether it's a real religion or people playing religion to try to control people, or both, or neither. It's like, right. I'm going to start this running. Every year, there's like one movie that I pick where I just constantly reference back to for no reason. I'm just going to go back to Memoir of a Snail. In that film, there is...
Speaking in tongues.
Yeah, there's a family that speaks in tongues. It is played as a deadly serious but weirdly funny moment where, like, the main character is like, what, or the secondary main character is like, what the fuck am I seeing right now? And the audience is laughing. But for that family, that is 100% deadly serious. There's a scene that takes place at a dinner where people suddenly start praying, and I have no idea what I'm supposed to think about that. Like, are they acting and putting on a show, or are they serious? And is it weird for everybody, or is it weird just for the characters who don't know what to do? But then, like, the other girl sitting at the table with Mickey also starts kind of singing by the end of their thing. And I'm like, I don't know what it's supposed to do. So there's a religious aspect of things. There's the sauce stuff that I joked at the beginning. I don't know whether she makes good sauces. Like, I don't know whether the joke is she's obsessed with sauces, but everything she makes is awful and terrible, and everybody's pretending to like it because they think it's fancy to like sauces. And, like, I just don't know what the joke is. Maybe I'm an idiot, but it just feels like, because everything is so satirical, I don't know the actual point narratively, or what things are supposed to mean, because it feels just like they're going for a joke. Same with, like, this is a film that posits a person who, this is like live, die, repeat if it was against your will. And you are kind of just enslaved by this giant corporation that is causing you to die. There's a couple of confusing things, Stephen. I get that, like, and nobody believes that Mickey would volunteer for this, but is he the only person who volunteered? You never see anybody else being printed. Nobody else is treating other people like they're expendables. Yet
he's the only expendable in the program. They even had some negotiation about only having one for the sake of scientific inquiry.
then why are there all these rules that imply that there could be cases that would only happen when you have multiples at scale, or you have expendables at scale, right? Like, like this has to be literally the first time there was a multiple. When did they create the rules about multiples? Except for, you know, back on Earth or whatever. But like, you know, it just, there's a bunch of stuff where I'm like, I don't get it. If you are trying to survive a dying planet by flying to another planet, maybe instead of just engineering a vaccine that lets you breathe on a toxic planet, maybe find not a nice planet. Like, there's a bunch of stuff that, like, just because it's funny is happening, but I don't logically buy in the universe that is a situation. So that's kind of like tonally where this film is. But I still really like the idea of some of the things this film brings up. Mickey being a double, as we know from the trailer, him responding to like somebody who is constantly dying, reframing what it means to die because he's a double now, or a multiple. Like, those are interesting concepts. The way they talk about how far in the future we are by talking about their cameras are like 38K and stuff like that. Like, there's a bunch of funny stuff in the world that is logically consistent with the world that we're watching. And I had an amazing time living and playing in that space. I just don't think this film does anything with its premise. It's kind of just there to have fun, which I enjoy. Like you said, I enjoyed watching this film and I had a great time with it. I just don't know what this film is bringing to the table outside of just pure entertainment. The satire feels slightly wasted on me. You know, this film coming out a year ago maybe might have hit differently than it does right now, but it's just kind of like a weird place to be in right now and watching this film. And I don't know. Something about it was kind of left me empty by the end of it. But I still kind of enjoyed scene to scene what this film was doing. I just kind of don't know that I'm carrying anything out of the film with it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you bring up a good point. You described it as being too heavily satirical, and that's the way I had thought about it, is that it feels like it underlines a joke verbally to a degree that makes me not know whether the character is in on the joke or whether the character is playing a person who is so delusional and outrageous that they would say these things. And that happens again and again. It happens with Toni Collette with the sauces, right? The idea that sauce is the signifier of wealthy, upper class, sophisticated is very funny. I find that idea very funny. You can think of lots of contexts where that would be a amusing satire of the woman who is just obsessed with sauce, even though they're living on an ice planet where they can't really have access to food. Yeah. But she says all that out loud. She says, I like sauce because sauce proves that we are sophisticated, and now I can give sauces. And it's still funny to me to watch a movie where everything is that heightened, but I cease to know who... I know who I'm supposed to laugh at, but I don't know if my laugh is, wow, she is such a wacky person, or wow, she is so delusional, or look at the hypocrite who's eating sauce. Because the line between the thing you're making fun of and the fact that what you're saying is funny, it blurs, basically. And I feel like that happens again and again. There's a scene in a courtroom about multiples, a flashback that is so over the top, much like the praying is so over the top, that it ceases to feel like I'm living in a believable world where outrageous people do outrageous things. And instead I'm living in a movie that is only a satire. It is only a metaphor. And again, that's only kind of a criticism. And the reason I criticize it isn't that being over the top is bad. It's that I think it deflates the bite of your satire. Yeah. Something about the comedy slows down or drags when it feels like you're watching an improv scene where it's like the last 5 minutes or whatever when they've exhausted the premise and now they're just ratcheting up the insanity. And sometimes those 5 minutes can feel like 30 minutes because it's just a little too much there. And there were times watching this movie, especially when it was trying to be funny with a capital F, that I started to feel like it was dragging, and I wished I could check my watch, but I would never do that because I'm a kind film goer and I wouldn't look at a electronic in the theater. But I started to have those thoughts of like, okay, how much longer is this? They haven't given me the check yet. How long are we going to go into sauce territory? You know, and things like that were just a little strange. I think one feeling I have here is that comedy, specifically comedic phrasing, is not something that translates very well. And again, I haven't looked up like the screenwriting process here, or if there was a second AD. I don't know any of the details, but just something here feels broad in a way where all the ideas are very funny and all of the visual execution is very funny, but the verbal telling of the joke feels like everyone decided to play their own character and ham it up in the way they want, rather than necessarily building to something where the pitter patter of the dialogue makes you laugh at the end. You know, there's just something missing about the comedic timing of this movie. I do want to ask you though, how do you feel about the creepers? And I don't know how much we should go into spoilers, but that when I describe this movie starts with a premise and then the climax has nothing to do with its premise, that arc becomes basically the whole of the movie by the end, and I don't really understand why or what it's trying to say, or if I'm just an idiot and I don't see why that dovetails with the idea of Mickey 17 and 18. I just don't see the connection between anything happening in this movie.
I mean, technically, Stephen, this film starts and then reverses to tell you the premise. But when it starts with the creepers.
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
So, logically consistent. People can't see the face I'm making with one eyebrow up. But in general, you go to an ice planet, you're going to need some ice creepers. I mean, that's just the standard thing. It is kind of interesting, though, that you have this sort of live, die, repeat motif and a bunch of critters, but you don't, there's nothing like he could have just been being eaten by critters constantly, right? But they want to tell a different story. But then there's like a 10-second scene right at the end that like throws in this new thing in like where I'm like you literally do not need that scene at all. Maybe, or you know, once again, maybe I'm an idiot and I don't know why that scene is necessary.
It makes me wonder, because the movie becomes about how we treat other creatures or how we treat things that we are afraid of, which I guess you could argue is a version of the capitalistic taking people for granted or othering, and it's just in the soup. But it just feels so different from the laser sharp thing that they're doing with the idea of expendables or multiples. And even in the expendables storyline, Mickey has a character arc that is sort of about his fear and his confidence and how he can make sense of living in a world where he can't control fate and what ownership or guilt should he feel for the things that happen. That is emotionally how the movie resolves, but I feel like I missed the part where it sets it up as the stakes of the movie. I don't know. There are just a few things where it feels like there are story arcs that happen, but they're missing a leg, or they're in the mix at such a low volume for half of the movie that when the volume is suddenly ramped up, I feel a bit confused. I feel like I didn't actually get a satisfying end to the idea of expendability or multiples or, you know, the core metaphor of the movie. It almost feels like multiple movies got smushed together, and which one won out in the end was just like found in the edit. It's just an odd outcome.
Yeah, and I think too that for me, in a dystopian world in which expendables are a thing, the way you utilize expendables is in isolation. You put them off on their own. They're just working towards whether this is a situation kind of like in Alien Romulus, right? Where they're like, oh, if we just work long enough, we can get off this planet. And they're like, I added more debt to your system. Sorry. Like, that's the kind of world in which this totally makes sense. I don't feel like you put an expendable in with the general population. And even if you do, you should be a goddamn hero. Like, everybody would be dead 17 times over. Or I should say 16 times over if it wasn't for Mickey, right? So there is like, again, it works as satire in comedy. Like, hey, go out on the side of the ship. This thing's already repaired. Oh, well, actually, you're here for this reason. Like, those kind of things are funny. But in reality, I feel like people should like love. I mean, some people do love Mickey,
Yeah.
but I think that like everybody should be like, yeah, high fiving Mickey every time he comes in, right? Like he's like the Ender Wiggin of the ship, right? He's the one that like everybody should want to be in his squad because he's the one that's making all their shit possible. So I just there's something weird about the way it does. And I remember one of the other examples of like the satire versus the reality is like in Snowpiercer, right? There's like the trains and the different cars that symbolize different levels of society, right? And as you go up, there's more and more people who are participating in a rich society while everybody is in the back eating Jell-O bars and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But in this movie, as far as I can tell, there's the commander and his wife are the only quote unquote rich people in all of the entire existence of this block of humanity. So it doesn't feel like a real metaphor for the rich in society. It's two people play acting in a world where there is no, like, I guess that's why she wants sauces, because normal people can't make sauce, I guess. But it just, something about it just doesn't work for me. And I don't know what it is, but it's just something about it. It's like there's so many things that I like in this film that are funny and are interesting to think about, but then what we're getting is not actually doing anything with those building blocks.
Yep. I feel the same way. I will say the trailer had me worried about how heightened some characters were going to be, specifically Naomi Aki's character, Nasha. There's a scene in the trailer where she realizes there's two of them, and it's basically like the twins joke, rendered in trailer form.
Yeah.
I will say, I think the tone of the movie makes all of the heightened performances totally work for me. If not for the fact that, as I mentioned, the dialogue sometimes underlines the satire too much in a way that loses me, I actually mostly like what everyone is doing here. And specifically, her behavior is actually contextually justified why it feels so over the top in that moment. So just want to say that. I was relieved because I was afraid that it was going to be just an example of the movie taking wild, wild swings and every character living in kind of their own universe. But it isn't. Having said that, there are other times earlier in the movie where she takes sudden violent actions, and I don't know if that is a character trait of hers that we're meant to read into. There are certain, I don't know if it's implied backstories or just strange character traits that we aren't asked to think a lot about, but by the end of the movie, it feels like we should have thought a lot about it, given where these people wind up. Again, if you just take every character and plot where they begin and where they end, this movie feels like a jumble to me. But moment to moment, I like what all of the cast are doing. I don't really think anyone misunderstood the assignment.
Yeah, I think too, the biggest disappointment of this film, I think for me, is that we basically jump straight to 17. Mm-hmm. Like there are a few legit deaths that we do get to watch, but there is this period where like a huge swath of his previous lives are just them trying to find a vaccine. Yeah. And I think that robbed us of, like, not that I wanted this movie to be 4 hours long, but I feel like having some time to live with different versions of him and then have him die horribly would have been more funny.
Yeah.
At least that's kind of how I feel.
No, I agree. I felt a bit sad when they're doing the montage or telling the story and they say the number that he's on, and I'm like, oh my god, you're already at 16. I assumed there would be a lot of live, die, repeat in this movie, and there is a little bit, but there isn't quite as much as I would have liked.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
All right, are we with verdicts then?
I think we are.
All right. Stephen Miller, if you're going to give us a must-see, recommend with the caveat, wait for rental, pass the caveat, or must avoid, what would you give it?
My higher intellectual self wants to go wait for rental, but the part of me that enjoys wild swings and just big things happening on screen did get tickled a lot in this movie, so I'm going to nudge it up a bit to recommend with a caveat. Caveat is I don't think this is saying a ton. I think it's a very messy movie. It is definitely not a sharp, refined point that you're going to walk away thinking, wow, that communicated so much to me. But it is dazzling and big and fun and funny. I have issues with some of the comedic beats, but I still was glad that I watched it. So that's where I'm at. Am I rounding up? Is that if it weren't Bong Joon Ho and actors I like, would I be giving it this? I might be bumping it down to wait for rental. I don't know, but that's how I felt. I still felt warm about this movie. It just felt like a missed opportunity to be significantly better and sharper.
Yeah, I think for me, it is a wait for rental, but that doesn't necessarily have to be taken as like I hated this movie, because as I said, I genuinely had fun with it. If you were like, oh shit, I don't have a lot of time, do I need to fit this in before it leaves theaters next week or whatever? I would say, no, you don't. You can wait till it's like the #1 film on Netflix in like a month. But I think that just for me, it just doesn't rise to a level, not that I expected it to rise to a level of anything, but it's so much all over the place that to me, it's hard for me to really celebrate it in what it is. But maybe next time on my next life, after I get printed out, I can watch the next film and be like, oh, this is great.
Exactly. Yeah, Mickey 17 too. Maybe that one's going to be better.
All right, Steven. That's going to do it for our review of Mickey 17. If people want to find you throughout the week, where can they do that?
People can find me at Threads or Blue Sky at sdavidmiller or sdavidmiller.com.
People can find me at ChristopherInRealLife.com or ChristopherIRL on a number of social platforms. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com, where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so on Overcast, YouTube, Apple Podcast, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at twitter.com/spoilerwarning, facebook.com/thespoilerwarning, or instagram.com/thespoilerwarning. If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will come from a track selected from artlist.io, so hopefully you're enjoying that. We are done. We're going to take off and do something dangerous and potentially die and get reprinted again so that we can be back here next week to bring you another episode. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.